In this video you're going to learn why Down-Throw Thrupper is so broken for Mii Brawler and how to perform it correctly. I will cover everything you need to know about how to execute it, which characters can escape on which stages, how to set it up, and also the counterplay. You can skip between the different parts, but I really recommend you watch the whole thing to understand how it works. Let's start with Down-Throw Thrupper from ground level on Final Destination, which has the same ceiling as Lilac Cruise, Pokemon Stadium 2, Yoshi's Story and Small Battlefield. This chart shows the earliest kill percents for each character, as well as some more details which I will explain later. It is assumed that the opponent will DI away from you and use their fastest escape option, mainly air dodging. Jump as an escape is not factored in, as it usually gets caught anyways. The attempted directional air dodge in most cases will also be directed away from Brawler, which will be important later. Rage affects this combo quite drastically. The higher the opponent's weight, the higher the effect of Rage, meaning Jigglypuff will die 18% earlier at max Rage, Mario 20% earlier, and Bowser 30% earlier. It does however not significantly increase or decrease the percent window, but only shift it downwards. Now for the important part, execution. First thing to notice that it doesn't matter whether you buffer the throw or pummel before, the relative position between you and your opponent is always going to be the same. To get a guaranteed KO, you have two main goals. You want to delay the up B as much as possible so you can gain more height, and you want to perform an inwards Thrupper. What I mean by inwards is that you should hold your control stick towards Brawler once the move started, so you travel almost directly upwards. Be careful though to not flick your control stick too early, or you will be reversed on accident. There are two different methods for performing grounded Down-Throw Thrupper. The dash first method works on every character but should only be used on the ones marked red. As the name suggests, you have to dash for a very short while and then jump and double jump towards your opponent. You want to only dash far enough to still hit them with the inwards Thrupper. Start the jump any later than that and you're gonna miss crucial time and thereby height. Make sure to hold down the first jump input long enough for it to be a full hop. A short hop won't accelerate you fast enough. At later percents, it is less important to hit the inwards Thrupper, as the outwards one will also kill. You also want to aim for the second to last hit of Thrupper to connect at the highest possible percent. The final hitbox comes out 5 frames after the one before. Using these 5 frames to gain more height and hit the foregoing hitbox is more efficient in comparison. The second method is the no dash method and works only on the characters marked green. You might have guessed it already, but this means you do not have to dash before jumping towards your opponent. Instead, you buffer your first jump right after the throw ends. Hold your control stick towards your opponent for the whole time until the last moment where you input the inwards Thrupper. If your timing is correct, you will hit the opponent kind of sideways and drag them up from there. At higher percents, in most cases you can keep doing this and only replace the inwards Thrupper with an outwards one. Against some characters though, you might also have to dash first at the absolute highest percents possible. The no dash method is easier to execute and also kills much earlier, so it's definitely worth remembering. There is however a limitation to it. In some of these examples, the Thrupper hitbox might have seemed a little weird. Some characters just get scooped in from far away, even if they were clearly somewhere out of range. The reason for that is that I specified this chart for opponents air dodging away from you. Directional air dodging has this weird property where you first move to the opposite side of your input during the air dodge startup. For some characters, this shifts their hitbox so much that Thrupper will still catch them during that startup. If the opponent were to air dodge towards you, the starter would shift them away from you, making it impossible to hit most characters with the no dash method. But more about that in the counterplay section. Now that we've covered the DI out case, let's look at the other options. No DI in that regard is very straightforward. Against no DI at all, the combo simply becomes easier to perform and kills for a way larger percent window. The execution pretty much stays the same, your timing is just way less strict. DI in is a little more difficult, but not by much. Opponents will die even earlier than with no DI at all, but the execution is a bit more tight. Again, you start with either the no dash or dash first method depending on character, and jump. Once you notice they are DI in, simply B reverse your up special and you should be fine. From my experience, it is possible to react offline, but most likely not on Wi-Fi. The inputs can be a little difficult as you have to B reverse and then instantly hold to the other direction to get the inwards Thrupper, but it's definitely doable. On stages with higher blast zones, you usually won't be able to get a guaranteed KO from ground level. On the few characters it works on, mainly lightweights, the lowest kill percents go up by around 17% on Battlefield and Kalos and 15% on Town and City and Smashville. The reason it won't work on most characters anymore is the switch from inwards to outwards Thrupper. At the point where you have to use outwards Thrupper to still hit your opponent, you will lose a lot of height to drag your opponent upwards, and by that also a significant part of your kill power. Usually this isn't a problem, because it still has the same knockback as it had at early percents, but on larger stages it means we cap our maximum possible knockback before the necessary power is reached. Phew, that was a lot of technical stuff. Here's a quick recap before the next part. On Final Destination, Pokemon Stadium 2, Lighted Cruise, Small Battlefield and Northern Cave, Down-Throw Thrupper can kill a lot of characters from ground level. There are two different methods, the dash first and no dash method, which work on different characters and at different percents. They also depend on which direction the opponent tries to escape. Rage will shift the whole percent window downwards by 20 to 30%. Against no DI and DI in, it'll kill even earlier than that. On all other stages though, most characters are immune as long as they DI out. The next part will focus on platforms and platform setups. The execution method changes a bit, so let's talk about that first. At low percents, until around 55%, you want to use the no dash method on all characters. But instead of starting Thrupper somewhere under or besides your opponent, you now want to input the move slightly above them. The reason for that is, no matter which part or hitbox of Thrupper you first connect, the opponent will be dragged up to the exact same final hitbox either way. So if you hit with the very first hitbox as low as possible, you travel the highest and apply the knockback closest to the blast zone. This makes a huge difference when you look at examples like these. If you were to input up special at the same position a Luigi would, just below Bowser, Thrupper won't kill until 80%. But if you jump just above him and scoop him up, it'll KO at 56%. This gets more and more important the lower the percents go on the higher platforms. So, how effective are platforms? These graphics by BMZ show the average percentages where you could expect a kill. With perfect execution, these can go down a few more percents, and with Rage, well, Jigglypuff dies at 12% on the PS2 platform, so yeah, it's definitely worth to go for. The next question is, how do I get my opponent on a platform in the first place? Experienced players won't just come up there to challenge me. First, you have to recognize that camping on a platform in certain matchups is an insanely strong tool. If you're already in the lead, don't be scared to spend a few seconds on the top Battlefield platform waiting for Mario to come to you. But if that doesn't work, there are some useful setups to get them up there. Down tilt and up tilt. At the right percents, these two moves will force a tech situation on any platform, which allows for a tech chase. There are multiple techniques for tech chasing on platforms, but I recommend either wave landing as far away as possible from the opponent, or jumping over the platform, fast falling and then short hopping to avoid get-up attacks. The same thing works with down throw on Battlefield and Yoshi's Story. Depending on the eye, you can tech chase for a regrab and get a kill at any percents. Landing up air is also an option, however it's only a small window and usually better to try and follow up with something else, like another up air into up tilts. It's still good to keep in mind though. Up tilt and down air can hit opponents under the platform who try to contest you with non-disjointed moves. Especially up tilt hits surprisingly low and can combo into a grab. Lastly, you can always empty land grab opponents who shield on platforms themselves. Now for some tricks you can use to surprise your opponent. For the first one, instead of pummeling, you want to buffer your throw as fast as possible after the grab. Down throw only gives your opponent 27 frames to react with the right DI, so especially on Wi-Fi it's not unlikely to miss it. So if your opponent is just barely in kill range, consider not pummeling but throwing them as fast as possible to catch them off guard. The second trick involves DI trapping your opponent in the corner. If you get a grab close to ledge at around 100 to 110%, forward throw won't kill but put them in a really bad situation, even worse if they DI away from you. So a lot of people will DI towards you on reflex, similar to Captain Falcon or Palutena. So going for down throw instead will most likely leave them vulnerable for a Thrupper follow-up instead. Hitting only the first hit of Thrupper, or only the first and last hit, looks like Smash 4 jank, but it's unfortunately pretty useless. Normal Thrupper will always kill earlier than these variants, even if you do manage to get it on purpose and not just by accident. The last part will cover counterplay and counterplay. The most obvious note here is, don't get grabbed. This might seem trivial, but if you can survive that small percent window where the combo is true, or simply wall brawler out, you will have a much harder time killing. The brawler player, however, might catch on to repeated spot dodges and jumps, knowing you are playing defensive. Don't challenge brawler on a platform if you don't have a large disjoint. Even if you're at 20%, an up tilt air dodge read grab will still kill you. Avoid going to Yoshi story, PS2 or generally stages with lower blast zones. The grab combos on Battlefield and Smashville are still strong, but not dying from ground level is invaluable depending on your character. Finally, the most technical but also effective counterplay. Air dodge towards brawler instead of away. This ruins any attempts at the no dash method and will make the follow-up a lot harder if you're fast enough. But no reason to panic, brawler mains. At higher percents where the combo is more lenient, you can still hit any attempted escapes. Also, if your opponent knows about air dodging in words, it simply becomes a 50-50 instead of a guaranteed kill. Just bait the air dodge and then jump up for a guaranteed Thrupper, which you kill even earlier than usual. And that's it for Down-Throw Thrupper. This video contained a lot of technical details, so I recommend watching certain parts a second or third time to fully understand them, and experiment alongside it. Optimizing this combo will drastically improve your gameplay and make Brawler a lot scarier at relatively low percents. If you have any questions left, please leave them below, and until the next video.